This happened back when I was in 4th grade. It's always stuck out to me as odd, but when I became an adult, it dawned on me just how dangerous it really was. I had been invited to a friend's birthday party, which was to be held at a popular pizza joint that had a bunch of arcade games and stuff. And this pizza place was right next door to a small movie theater, and the movie Titanic had just come out, so there were a decent amount of people in this part of the shopping center. My mom had to run some errands and pick up one of my other brothers, so she dropped me off along the way. She said she was going to stay until others arrived for the party, but I knew she had a lot to do. The place was familiar to me, and I knew my friends were either already inside or would be there shortly, so I told her to just drop me off and I went inside. My mom had also arranged a ride home for me for one of my friend's parents. No one had gotten there yet, so I had a look around at the different games, and then went outside the restaurant to wait for my friends to show up. There were a bunch of people outside the theater, lined up waiting to get inside for the early evening showing of Titanic. And that's when I noticed that a couple, a guy and a girl, were standing by a car smoking cigarettes and looking over at me. That chunk of time had passed, probably about 20 minutes, and I was very confused why my friends hadn't shown up yet. I knew for a fact that I was at the right place, and I had showed up at the right time. I was going over all the reasons why they might be late, when the cigarette-smoking couple came over to me and started to talk to me. They asked me who or what I was waiting for. Obviously, at first, I was a bit hesitant to talk to strangers, but they looked to be my oldest brother's age, late teens or early 20s, so I had been around older people and wasn't too bashful or shy around them. I explained to them that I was waiting for my friends to show up for a birthday party, but they hadn't shown up yet and were all pretty late. The couple made some other small talk. They told me they were wanting to see Titanic, but when they showed up, all the tickets were sold out for the showing they wanted, so they were just going to hang out until the next showing. After a little while longer of waiting and talking to this couple, they asked if I was hungry. I said I was, and they offered to buy me a pizza. As a hungry kid who was seriously looking forward to pizza, but was unsure if the party was still going to happen, I wasn't about to pass it up. We went inside and ordered, and sat down together. I ended up hanging out with this couple for a very long time. They were being super nice to me, gave me money for arcade games, and bought me as much pizza and soda as I wanted. I had almost completely forgotten about my friends and the party that was supposed to happen, until I saw what time it really was. Almost 2 hours had passed, and I started to get pretty anxious and nervous. I wasn't sure how I was going to get home. I didn't have a cell phone since this was 1997, and neither did my parents. My mom would be furious that A, no one showed up to the party, B, I didn't seek out help from the restaurant or some kind of security guard or police officer, and C, I'd spent the last 2 hours with strangers, accepting food and money from them. I decided to ask this couple what I should do. This is where things started to get strange. The man turned to me and said flatly, "You don't need to go home." Thinking back, I definitely couldn't fully comprehend the weight of what he said. I didn't know what to say to that, so I kind of just shrugged in confusion and said I needed to find a phone. I went up to the counter and asked if I could use their phone, and they let me. I called home, but no one answered. I tried again, and still nothing. I then told the people at the counter that I was trying to get picked up, but no one was answering from the phone at home. I must have looked pretty panicked, because just then the guy from the couple came over and put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Don't worry, we'll get this all figured out." Then he gave me more money to play a few more arcade games while he figured it out with the guys behind the counter. No idea what they talked about specifically, but I ended up playing another game and then went back to the table we were at. The guy came back over and said that they were going to take me home. He was being super positive and upbeat about it, and was insisting that there was no problem whatsoever. His girlfriend was also being very insistent and supportive of the idea. Part of me was super hesitant, because I was taught stranger danger and all that. But the other part of me was wanting to believe it was really all innocent, and I was really grateful that these people had been so nice to me, fed me, and kept me entertained. They had even missed their movie to stay with me. I said that I wanted to try calling home a few more times. Over the next 15 or 20 minutes, I called back home a bunch, but there was still no answer. I decided I would say yes to these people, and have them take me home. Again, I was young, impressionable, and naive. The people behind the counter must have been seeing this from a more rational side, and realized something seriously fishy was going on. One of them had gone on break and called the police to come over and address the situation. A policeman shows up and comes over to figure out what's going on. I don't remember everything about the conversation, but what it ended up coming down to was who was going to take me home. The couple was still really insistent. Thinking about this as an adult, I find it strange that the cop was even considering letting this whole thing be an option. As an adult, there's no question in my mind that the cops should have shut the conversation down and taken me home, but for some odd reason they let me decide. I felt like I was being pressured. I remember going back and forth in my mind. These people had been so nice to me, and had hung out with me, and I didn't want to be rude. I also felt really intimidated by the police officer. I remember this part as if it were yesterday. As I was thinking, the cop went over to talk to some of the guys behind the counter, and while he was away, the guy from the couple looked at me with a smile and asked, "Do you want to go with him or us?" I told him I would go with them. Again, in hindsight, I still can't believe the cop let this happen. As we were getting our things to go, the officer did say that he was going to follow us the whole day, which was a redemptive reassurance. The officer asked for my address and my parents' names. I got in the couple's car and told them where I lived, and we were on our way. The girl was driving, and the guy was in the front passenger seat. The entire drive, the man was looking over his shoulder out the back window, glancing back and forth between me and the cop following behind us. We pulled up to my house, and I went to the front door where both the couple and the cop were parked on the street. I opened the door and went inside, and saw my mom looking out the window with a very confused and concerned look on her face. She went outside and found out all that had happened, and was furious. I didn't tell her the specific things that the couple had said to me. Again, I didn't understand the full gravity of the whole situation until years later. Going through the whole scenario in my head, if the cop hadn't followed us, I more than likely would have been abducted. Thinking about all the things that they had done and said, befriending me and feeding me and giving me money to play games, was them totally trying to come across as disarming and trusting and friendly. A totally fucked up situation that could have been so much worse. It's hard to think about. I'm almost 30 now and have kids of my own, and thinking about them in this kind of situation makes my blood boil. Context. I grew up my entire childhood without a father. When I turned 15, I got really into hunting and just enjoyed guns in general. My uncle is an avid hunter, gun builder, and ammunition reloader. He loves to hunt. This was a common interest that made us become very close. He was my father figure, and taught me a lot that made me the man that I am today. Now on to the story. My uncle's father lives in Montana, which allowed us to get resident pricing on big game hunting tags. Once a year we would head up to his property and hunt for about a week. Usually this would go off without a hitch, and if we were lucky, we would get the shot we were looking for. Unfortunately, not this year. Just like every year, we headed up to his father's property in northern Montana. That night, we headed out to go set up some hunting cameras so that we knew that there were deer in the area, so we knew it was a good place to hunt. It must have been about 1 a.m., and we were driving down this 2-lane dirt road, headed into the woods. We were always the only people on the road since it was so early in the morning. This particular time, though, We saw headlights approaching from behind us, but thought nothing of it. We figured they must have been doing the same thing as us. After tailing us for some time, the headlights disappeared, which was strange since there were no turns on this particular road. A few seconds go by, and all of a sudden we see the truck driving on the shoulder to our right with the lights off. And the shoulder was a small hill with brush and a fence fairly close to it. Definitely something that nobody should be driving on. The truck speeds up and gets back on the road, turns its lights back on and speeds off into the darkness. This set off some red flags, but we figured they were just impatient and wanted to get there before us. No big deal, or so we thought. We drove down the road for a few more miles until we saw taillights stopped in the middle of the road. It was the truck that had passed us a few miles back. They had set up traffic cones to completely block the road off, and there was another truck parked on the shoulder. We figured they must have broken down, so we stopped. I had read an article online earlier this year about people in other countries that would make roadblocks to rob and kill people for their vehicles and belongings. I started to laugh and tell my uncle about this article, when two men from each truck jumped out of their vehicles and started to approach ours. My uncle always kept two handguns on shoulder holsters under his arms when we were out doing these kinds of things. This saved our lives. Two of the men stayed at the tailgate of the truck parked on the road, and the other two men came up to his window. At this point, my uncle has his right hand in his jacket, with his hand holding the gun. The men were extremely friendly, and said that the truck on the shoulder had broken down, and that they were just helping him out. They asked if my uncle knew anything about cars, and if he could come help them take a look at the problem. My uncle refused, and this made the men angry. Both instantly drew pistols, and one of the men rounded the front of the truck towards my window. The uncle grabbed the man's gun that was pointed at him, which he had forgotten to load a round into, luckily for us. My uncle pulled his gun out and shot the man in the shoulder and slammed on the gas, driving on the left shoulder past all of the men. I looked back and could see the other three men gathering around the man that my uncle had shot. We drove and drove and drove what seemed like an eternity without saying a word to each other. We drove back to his dad's house, and he told me to go to bed. He called the police and told them what had happened. They sent out two officers to the house to take his statement, and mentioned to him that they had quite a few reports of roadblocks being set up all around northern Montana. They were able to catch all four of the men who stopped us that night, when they took the man who was shot to the hospital. I haven't told this story in a while, because it makes me shake with anger when I do, but I figured it may fit in this sub well. Bear with the long story, please. This story dates back to about 1.5 years ago, when my daughter was around 4 months old. I'm a 26-year-old mother. I had just moved in with my then SO to a dangerous part of town, but the street we moved to wasn't too bad. Everyone knows their neighbors, and everyone seems to get along well. Well, since everyone in the neighborhood chats with each other, one of my neighbors warned my SO and I about a homeless woman that parks her van on the street and harasses everyone who walks by her car. They said to try and avoid her as best as possible. Side note, parking in this town is street parking only, no reserved parking spots. This will have significance later. I thought, meh, that's one small downside to living here, along with the street parking. Not that big of a deal as long as I avoid her, right? Wrong. So the next day after our neighbor's warning, after returning home from a long day at work and picking up my infant daughter, homeless lady, really slender meth head wearing what appeared to be newish clothes, breath reeking of something foul, is walking up the left side of the sidewalk, screaming up a storm at these teenage kids who look terrified. The teenagers aren't engaging her, just keep walking and looking at each other with uncertainty. I stay on the right side of the sidewalk, even though I knew I'd have to cross the small street to the left where my apartment was located. My daughter wakes up from her nap in my arms and begins to coo. The homeless lady spots me crossing the street with my purse, work bag, my baby, her baby bag, and decided it's a good idea to come up and chat with me about her conspiracy theories as I'm walking up to my apartment. Fine, no big deal. At least she's not bothering those kids anymore. Then, as I'm fumbling to get my keys to open the gate that leads to my complex, she asked for money. I told her the truth. I'm sorry, but I don't carry any cash on me. But while I'm trying to hold on to my baby, find my keys, hold all my bags. Her response is to call me a stuck-up bitch. And then she continues muttering under her breath, which I must repeat was rank, and starts harassing more kids down the block. A couple of months go by, and she continuously comes up to harass me, as if she doesn't recall who I am every single day. Every day I apologize and say I need to get home, or I don't have any money still, or I simply don't have enough time to chat right now. Every answer I give her is met with an insult, both directly and under her breath. At this point, I'm still not concerned. I've always had a soft spot for the homeless, and I'm aware that this lady has severe mental illness. I always apologize for not having money to give, even through the insults. One night at around midnight, my daughter wakes up crying horribly. My SO and I take her temperature, 103-degree fever. I tell him it's time to take her to the emergency room immediately before it gets worse. We gather everything up, and I gently take her from bed and lay her against my chest. She's so helpless, weak, burning hot, and whimpering terribly. I still want to tear up thinking about it to this day. So as we walk out of the apartment, my SO says he'll run down 3 blocks to grab the car. Remember, it's all street parking, so we often had to park blocks away. I say okay, and I'll stand in front of the apartment so he can just pick us up, and we'll book it to the ER. Wrong choice. I watched as he ran all the way down the street and turned the corner out of sight. Then I look back at the baby and start rocking and shushing her so that maybe she could get a little bit of sleep or rest before being at the hospital all night. Moments later, when I look up, the homeless lady walks around the same corner that my SO just ran around and makes a beeline straight towards me. I get a little uneasy as I have a sick baby in my hands, but maybe she'll leave me alone this time, right? No. That was wishful thinking to the max. Oh, hey there, sis. Daddy just told me that baby's done sick and she needs a healer. I'm still trying to gently rock the baby as she's startled back awake, and wondering why the fuck he told this lady about the baby being sick. What? Sorry? I'm a healer. My mama and I have been healers since birth. Give me that baby. Still trying to give her the benefit of the doubt, knowing she's mentally ill. Sorry, I'm waiting on her dad to bring the car around so we can take her to the hospital. Can you keep your voice down? She's trying to sleep. Nah, baby girl. I'm a healer, didn't you hear me? I said I was a healer. You know what a healer is, don't you? Give me your baby. At this point, she reached out and put her incredibly dirty hands on my daughter's leg and foot and wouldn't let go. Excuse me. Let her go now. Give me the baby. She's very sick and you're waking her up. Stop. You bitch. Let me heal her, you selfish bitch. If you don't let go right now, I'll kill you. It was at this point that she and I locked eye contact, and her facial expression was what I can only describe as the most terrifying evil look a person can give, with her eyes and smile widening with every passing second. This lady's face still haunts me. She then broke out into a laugh so loud and terrifying that I can't believe I didn't piss myself. By this time, my daughter was crying hysterically. My internal dialogue went something like this. Fuck, where the fuck is my SO? I'm gonna have to set my sick infant daughter on the ground and kick this lady's ass just to get her not to kidnap my kid. It also crossed my mind that if I did that, I'd probably be the one arrested. Like a Hail Mary, my SO comes around the corner in the car, and I reiterate to the lady that my SO is down here, and if she doesn't stop harassing me, I'll kill her. This finally struck some chord inside her brain, and she takes off running down the street, cursing profanities loudly. My daughter's crying has me in tears too after being yanked so hard by this lady. I still wonder what could have happened if she yanked hard enough to take my sick daughter away from me. My SO ended up admitting that he felt bad for her, so he told her that our baby was sick and even struck up a conversation with her about it. All the while, his daughter and I were waiting outside past midnight, alone in a bad area. Needless to say, he is now my ex. He even later laughed about the entire thing and told me I was exaggerating and that she was harmless. I don't think anyone who would have seen the look on this woman's face would label her as harmless. She looked very much like she was ready to harm. I've been scrolling through Let's Not Meet for weeks now, reading every story and trying to get the courage to post my own, so here goes nothing. Please excuse the grammar and spelling. I'm no English major. It was last summer, July of 2017, when I decided to take my toddler to the park. It's about 2 miles from my house, on the other end of town. Thinking about it now, the park is an awful location, secluded on a back road, in the middle of nowhere. But at the time, I thought it would be a good place to allow my darling 2-year-old to roam around, without having to worry about traffic. I was about 5 months pregnant at the time, and figured I could use the exercise, so I loaded her up in her stroller and walked over. My daughter was, and still is, a huge fan of the whole rock hunting trend, so upon our arrival, I took her out of her stroller, parked it under the pavilion, and hand in hand we went along the creek and through the park, scavenging for painted rocks. I noticed a glittery rock under the bottom of the slide, and pointed it out to my daughter. She ran and scooped it up, yelling and screaming, "I found one, Mommy, I found one." Next, I heard clapping. It was then that I first noticed a man sitting down at a picnic bench near the pavilion, eating a sandwich. He had a smile on his face which initially seemed friendly, and he was clapping at my daughter's excitement and even let out a woo-hoo. He looked to be around my age at the time. I'd guess around 23. I found out later he was in his early 30s. He was wearing sweatpants and a plain black tank, beanie on his head, baseball sneakers, and a book bag. Me being from a small town where everyone is just genuinely friendly, I thought that maybe he had just walked over from the basketball courts down the street and just wanted some shade to eat his lunch under. My little one was so persistent on finding more rocks that I didn't even have time to think before she took my hand and led me over to a small bank down to the duck pond. And I didn't realize at the time that my phone, my pepper spray, everything I had with me, was now in a stroller under a pavilion with a total stranger, and my daughter and I were out of sight. After a few minutes of searching the rim of the pond for rocks, we decided it was time to go play on the playground. As we crossed over the top of the bank, I could see this man rummaging through my stroller. I reached to my pocket for my phone so that I could call the town cops, thinking that this was just some thug looking for some spare cash or maybe a purse in my child's stroller. Then I realized I left my phone there too. I'm 2 miles from my house. The park is completely surrounded by creeks and ponds, with the entryway being the only way in, and the nearest house is about 1/2 mile past the pavilion. So even if I wanted to run or go get help, this guy would obviously see me and flee. Now let me remind you, at this moment I wasn't thinking the worst. I didn't think about this guy being a potential killer or rapist. My main concern was that he was going to steal my belongings. Naive, I know. After a couple of minutes of standing there, watching him go through the stroller, he looks up. Our eyes lock, and I say, "Excuse me?" He replies, "I'm sorry. Do you happen to have an aspirin? I'm not feeling well." I shook my head no, grabbed the stroller in one hand and my daughter's hand in the other. Hindsight, I should have at this point put my toddler in her stroller, but I didn't because I knew that I just wanted out of there as quickly as possible. This is when things got weird. Well, do you have any water? Or maybe a bite to eat? I think my blood sugar is low, I heard him say in an innocent tone. My mind started going miles a minute. I literally just watched him eat a whole sandwich. This was a trap. Well, aren't you the cutest little thing I've ever seen? What does your shirt say? He says to my toddler as he lunges out and grabs her shoulder. I grip her hand tight and pull her towards me. You've got to be kidding me, he read. Oh, how cute. Do you like kittens? I have a couple at my house just down the road. I swooped her up and grabbed the stroller and started walking as fast as I could with a giant baby belly and a squirmy toddler in my arms. I wasn't trying to scare you, I hear him yell. I keep walking. I get to the entrance of the park, turn around and see that he's following me, hot on my trail. He's smiling. His smile now doesn't seem so kind and innocent, more malicious and twisted. He's waving at me, trying to flag me down. I know at this rate, due to my pregnancy and my toddler kicking and screaming, that he would eventually catch up to me. So I stop, strap my daughter in her stroller, missing 2 buckles, and take off. I'm now trying to figure out how to get my phone. I know that it's in my purse, in the bottom of the stroller, but I can't reach it without stopping and digging it out. Every couple of feet I would look back and see this creep was still behind me. Every single time he was, until I hit town. I assumed that the increase in traffic scared him off. At this point I call 911, who puts me through to the state police barracks. I told them what happened. They took a report and asked if he was still following me. I told them that I didn't think he was. They said that since I was now within 1/2 mile of my home, that they would just send a trooper over to my house whenever they got a chance to finish their report and get a description. No cop ever came. The next day I called at 8 a.m., demanding an officer to come out. Once again, I was told they would when they got a chance, so I took to the almighty Facebook with my story. Not so much for attention, more to let other parents know to be aware when taking their kids to that particular park. That night, at 9 p.m., the local news shared my story all over Facebook. At 9:10, my phone rang. It was a local police officer asking me to remove my Facebook post because it was causing an uproar at the community. I went off. This man harassed me and my toddler, tried talking my toddler into going to his home, and followed me into town, and they couldn't care less. Fast forward 2 weeks. I was looking at the local news page and came across my story. I see that someone has responded to it with the ha-ha emoji reaction. I click to see who it was, and I see his name. Let's just say it's Tim Smith. I start looking through his photos, trying to put a face to the name, and then I see it. A photo of Tim Smith, with the creep from the park. The caption saying, "My son and me," and all of the comments asking if he was out of jail yet. I mentioned this to my husband, and he had the brilliant idea to look up the last name Smith on Megan's Law to see if anything would show up. Sure enough, there he was. He did 8 years in jail for molesting a 4-year-old, and had a couple of other charges on his record too. I called the police and reported that I now know the name of the person, and know for a fact that he's a child predator, and shouldn't have been that close to a park or school. There's a daycare about a mile away which we walked past when he was following me. Again, they dismissed me. Just last month, I made a public Facebook post on the local rock hunting page about how excited I am to start rock hunting again, now that the snow has melted. A bunch of people liked the post, but only one person commented. Someone by the name of Ron Smith, who wrote, "I can't wait to see you again." What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. I have a little bit of an update here for you guys. I've recently started streaming a little bit on Twitch. I don't know if you guys are interested in just hanging out and seeing a bit of gameplay of maybe Monster Hunter or some games like that, maybe a few horror games, but I'll leave a link to my Twitch in the description of the video below. As always, if you guys like the video, please leave a comment or perhaps like or subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you'd like to message me, or you'd like to send in a story for me to read, or you have a suggestion for a story I should read, the links to all of my social media will be in the description of the video below as well. This includes my Facebook, Twitter, Gmail, and now, of course, my Twitch account. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible, but please guys be patient, because I do get a lot of messages, so if I don't respond to you right away within like a week or two, just be a little patient. I'll get to it as soon as I can. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the description of the email or message what the name of the story is, what the category of the story is, and how you would like to be credited in the video that the story appears in. If you guys are curious about the music used in this video, links to the music and the order in which the music appears will always be in the description below the video, so you can go ahead and check that out there. Last but not least, if you guys do enjoy my content, please take a look at my Patreon, and if you feel so inclined, maybe donate like $1 or something. Every little bit helps. It'll never be necessary, but of course, it's always an option if you guys would like to support the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.